July is Client Appreciation Month at Sport Clips Haircuts. Get a double MVP for the price of an MVP, or cool it down and try the MVP on ice. It's our way of saying thanks for all you do. Hurry, ends July 31st. Sport Clips. It's good to be a guy.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNradio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. As we have for you from Monday, the U.S. women earned their third star. Julie Foudy recaps the World Cup final, compares this team to hers from '99. Rory McIlroy breaking news this morning, the details on his injury, plus a reminder not to overreact to everything you read on Twitter.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
We begin, of course, with the U.S. women's national team. Congratulations to them, Golic, champions of the world.
Well, you consider this matchup last year that went to PKs when Japan got the victory. Japan back to try and go back-to-back World Cups. And you can set up any game you want, and then you set up the biggest game in that sport, and then sometimes it just goes a certain way that you never expected. And this was obviously it. Nobody expected the USA to be up 4-0. Nobody expected Carly Lloyd to have a hat trick within 16 minutes. Nobody expected this, I'm sure, least of all Japan, and trying to fight back from it. So this one, while everybody was hunkering down, getting ready for it, getting ready to see, at the very least 90 minutes and probably more, I think the expectation was this one just out of the gate, had such a great feeling, and Twitter world was just having a ball with all of it. Except for one, trepidation moment in that 52nd minute when we had an own goal, and it was all of a sudden 4-2. That had to do just that, just that quick little, okay, let's, when you're up that much, I think you can, and I heard the announcer saying that, everybody trying to say you just got to keep your foot on the pedal. It's just hard. Physically and mentally, and we'll talk to Julie Foudy a little bit later, certainly about that. But I think any athlete in any sport, when you get up that much, I think just mentally and physically, you're just not playing the way you were to start the game. So all of a sudden it's 4-2, but we get a goal just a couple of minutes. Tobin Heath gets a goal a couple of minutes later in the 54th minute. And I think that was the dagger in a game that seemed over, but then was 4-2. I still felt pretty darn good about it. But that then was the dagger. But what a beginning for the USA in that game, in starting out and getting all those goals early. That from both sides of it. Because if you're an athlete in any sport long enough, you're on both sides of that equation, without question. And how do you deal with it on both sides? But, boy, from a spectator here in the States or around the world, if you're a fan of U.S. soccer, it couldn't have been any sweeter.
Well, and it couldn't have been any more different from the struggles that this team had early through the tournament. If you look in the first 20 minutes of their previous 6 games in this World Cup, the U.S. had scored only 1 goal. In the first 20 minutes last night, they scored 4 goals, 3 of them, of course, by Carly Lloyd. It's the first hat-trick ever in a Women's World Cup final. Only England's Jeff Hurst had done it in a men's final in 1966. It was the earliest ever hat-trick in the Women's or Men's World Cup, coming in the 16th minute. She is the first American, Carly is, to score in 4 straight World Cup games, the first American to score in 3 major tournament finals, and she's the second American to win the gold ball as the tournament's best player. So she was sensational. If you look at her first 4 games, and I think back, she was somewhat heavily criticized. I remember the announcers were talking about it. She was giving the ball away a lot in the midfield. Right. This is going back several games ago. Through the first 4 games of this tournament, she scored 1 goal. Through the final 3 games of this tournament, she scored 5 goals on 10 chances. So she just exploded, took over completely. And, yes, while you were right, at 4-2, you thought to yourself, well, maybe. But at 3-0, I thought this game was over.
Oh, I agree.
At 4-0, the celebration was on from coast to coast.
Yeah. That's when I started. Do I dare start to wonder what's on other channels and start flipping around? Knowing
it is Shark Week, Golic. It is Shark Week.
As Sydney, my daughter Sydney, tweeted out, Shark Week and True Detective was on last night. A hot show out there, and the U.S. playing and winning. So it was a great night for TV. And one of the things that Julie Foudy had brought up was the fact of she wanted to see that formation change, and you did. And certainly, you saw a difference in this offense. It got more aggressive. That's something she thought was missing early on in this tournament. And Lloyd was absolutely the spark plug for this. But it was just great to see. Absolutely just great to see. Great to see their aggressiveness when they really were going after it on the offensive side. Julie and others thought they were just sitting back a little too much. But once they started getting after it and being a little more aggressive, and this they had such a size advantage, 5'7" to 5'4", so they were getting the high balls, the headers. They were obviously able to outjump the Japanese players. So it was they just took control of this early. And as I said, if you play any sport long enough, you're part of this. And there's two mentalities to go. It's, the U.S., you try and keep going, but you're naturally not going to do the things that got you there. You're going to back off a little bit because, especially in soccer, we see it in football, my sport, American football all the time. We call that the prevent defense, which sometimes can cost you. But you just back off at times on the aggressiveness. And on the other side, there's at what point do you say, have you kind of checked out and said, okay, now we're playing for that P word. Now we're playing, you're playing for pride. No athlete ever wants to hear that, but you're already kind of being embarrassed, so you're playing for pride, and that's what Japan was doing. And at what point, I don't think you ever really check out. And I think at 4-2, they certainly were like, okay, maybe we have a shot here. And then the dagger came a couple of minutes later. But there is that side of it to say, okay, when mentally and or physically, when you thought this one could be over.
Carly Lloyd was saying exactly that. Mike and Mike is presented by Progressive Insurance. You can test drive Snapshot. See how much you could save before switching to Progressive. Visit progressive.com/snapshot. Carly Lloyd, who was the hero last night, said that they knew going into the game, if they got up early, it would put Japan on their heels.
There was no hesitation. There was no doubt. We were just super excited, super anxious to start this game, to play it, and we knew that if we take it to Japan, they're gonna get nervous on the pitch, and we locked them in, we pressured them, we scored early, which was fantastic, and it's just great.
And I think that's the thing is when you're the favorite. Again, you can speak to this better. You just were saying a moment ago, but I think add to it when you know you're supposed to win, and the other team knows you're supposed to win. Then if you give them life, then they start thinking, wait a minute, we're right here. And if you're up 4-0 16 minutes into the game, then that obviously goes in the other direction.
Well, without question, I even heard the announcers talking about the last 20 minutes of the first half was more the way that Japan wanted to play, and they got a goal in that time as well in the 27th minute. And I thought to myself, well, yeah. I mean, U.S. is not going to play the way they played when they were up 4-0. You just don't do it. I think even from a tactical standpoint, you start to back off a little bit and make sure you're playing that defense, which, of course, the U.S. has been playing phenomenal defense the entire tournament anyway, but you're just not going to stay there. As much as anybody wants to say they need to stay this way, you're not going to stay that way. Even if you're on the field and you even say it, try and stay that way, you're just not going to. And Japan is a championship team. So they keep playing hard, but I agree completely with Carly, is you could take someone's will at some point. If you're playing better than them and then you jump on them early, especially in a sport that has not seen this many goals scored in a World Cup final or a separation of more than 2 goals in a World Cup final.
Carly Lloyd has won Olympic gold, but says this just obliterates that.
I just had chills on my arms. Just the best feeling in the world. Olympic golds have been amazing, but there's something about this feeling. All the hard work, dedication, the fact that we haven't won in 16 years. It's just been a dream come true.
That's what I tweeted after is congrats for making history. The only country to win 3 World Cup titles on the women's side is, this is blood, sweat, and tears paying off. We get to see, and this is true in any sport, we get to see the finished product. We get to sit down, with our drink and our snacks and watch them start a match when the work that they've put in all the way along, and this is the culmination of their sport. Think of any other sport in that championship. When you win, there's that joy, but there's some relief as well as to all that work paid off. It actually paid off for us, and now, we stand on the top of the podium, and we reap the fruits of our labor.
Absolutely. The celebration was magnificent to watch the entire country get behind this to the degree that it did. And it was also magnificent to watch the leadership of Abby Wambach. And if you sort of look at, there was a conversation that took place here on ESPN Radio yesterday that we can sort of delve into a little bit later, and it's certainly not a novel idea, about the difference in the way a guy like Tim Duncan and a guy like Kobe Bryant are handling the ends of their respective careers.
Right.
And you look at Duncan, who is continuing to find ways to bring players into his team, who's taking less money, who's taking a lesser role, adding his leadership, being a piece of the puzzle rather than the man in the center of it all. And looks like now they've put together a legacy that is going to last beyond him with the addition of LaMarcus Aldridge on Saturday. And obviously we'll get to the basketball later. And Kobe Bryant, when you sort of look at it having gone the other way. Well, just look at Abby Wambach, who is – I'm not expert enough to tell you this, but she's right there on a level, I think, with Mia Hamm as among the greatest soccer players our country has ever produced. And yet in this World Cup was more than willing to take the back seat, to take the reduced role, but still add the enormous leadership and everything else, and was able to be on the field last night to win a World Cup in what will be her last World Cup game.
First half, I didn't know if it was real, if I had died or whatnot. I was asking my teammates next to me, I'm like, seriously, am I alive? I feel like this is like what heaven is supposed to feel like. I'm a World Cup champion. It's weird to say. It's weird to even, it's bizarre. It's just, this whole thing is bizarre, and I'm privileged and honored to be a part of it, and it's the truth.
It was the only thing missing from that resume. 183 international caps, most by any male or female. 25 career Women World Cup games, second most all time. 14 career Women World Cup goals, second all time. Tied. 249 caps, fifth most U.S. history. Two-time Olympic gold medalist, and now World Cup champion. That was the only thing missing from that resume. And you're right. I mean, to see her take that back seat and understand what the team needed, it was great to watch, because I saw early in the day the 9 for 9, Julie Foudy hosted it with
the 99ers.
The 99ers with about 10 of her players, and went through that season, and she, it turned out, had a camera through most of that and filmed a lot of it. And the sense of team, you know, when we have a lot of team sports out there, but certainly a lot of people that cash in and look to be more individual at times, to see the way that you play as a team, and everything is about team. And in that team, Mia Hamm was the one who was doing all the interviews, but always brought it back to team. Carly Lloyd doing the same thing here, as she has emerged as the star of this team, always bringing it back to the team and what they do together. It's really, really good to see, you know, these women get together and do what they're doing and have this success.
Julie Foudy was talking about that, about Abby Wambach.
What she has given to the game and what she has done in such an unselfish manner. To come in this World Cup as the greatest goal scorer to ever have played the game. And the way she handled that, it was nothing but positivity. It was about, look, I'm so happy. Our team is finally getting there. We're winning. We're getting into form. I mean, it was all of these messages that you want from a leader, never mind the greatest player to ever play. But now, for her sake, it seals her legacy, because she wanted this one so bad.
And as Julie's saying, she's the greatest player ever to play. And obviously, I defer to Julie on that.
Right.
The interesting thing is, remember, in the Men's World Cup a year ago, Jurgen Klinsmann, coaching the Americans, did not bring Landon Donovan.
Right.
Who might have provided sort of a similar kind of a role for the U.S. team. And I don't know exactly how his personality sort of is. You look at Abby. I mean, she's so ridiculously fiery, even on the sideline when she's not playing, and they have her mic'd up. Sometimes you hear her in huddles and all of that. So, I mean, she gets to celebrate a World Cup championship, and congratulate. What can you say? Congratulations. It was a thrilling ride. It was fun to watch. The entire country got on it, watching the viewing parties last night and everything else. And it was that. It was a party, as opposed to like the Germany game, which was gripping right up until the last 2 or 3 minutes. Last night was a party almost from the word go.
You got the party early in that one. You really got to kind of enjoy it. You know, we always talk about, how do you want to win a game, or how do you want to, you know, lose a game? Would you rather lose close or get blown out, or win? You go ahead this early and you kind of relax a little bit. But this one was a party everywhere, and congrats to them. And I'm sure they had themselves a good time last night.
No question. And we'll have plenty on this all morning.
Yeah, we
Mike
will.
and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance. Obviously, plenty of coverage of the Women's World Cup. But we have major, certainly it looks like major breaking news taking place as we speak from the world of golf. And for that, let's bring in our Jason Sobel on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Covers golf for us at ESPN. He's driving to the airport after what was a very interesting day at the Greenbrier yesterday, by the way, with Robert Strett putting with a wedge.
Yeah, how about it?
But, Jason, I saw it on your Twitter timeline just a few minutes ago. For everyone who's just waking up and obviously hasn't heard the news yet, what can you tell us about Rory McIlroy?
Well, good morning, guys. Rory McIlroy posted a picture on Instagram and posted it to Twitter about 15 minutes ago, saying that he has a ruptured ATFL, which is an ankle ligament. His leg is in what looks like a walking boot or maybe a cast, and he said he's going to try to recover as soon as possible. There was very vague information. There's not much else to go on right now, and I hate to speculate, but it certainly doesn't look like a short-term type of thing. And I'm sitting here trying to Google ATFL ruptures as I'm holding on waiting to talk to you guys, and it doesn't sound like something that's a very quick fix.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It says it's the most common of the ligament injuries that can occur as part of this ligament and the complex injury. So it is a common one, but like anything else, it's to what degree that you're going to hurt something.
He posted on Instagram with a note that he was having a soccer kickabout on Saturday, I guess just kicking a soccer ball around with friends, and seems to have torn a ligament in his ankle. And as you say, he's on crutches and he has a huge cast on his leg. Just quickly go through the schedule here, Jason. What is coming up on the schedule, including obviously the big one in a couple of weeks?
Well, he was supposed to play the Scottish Open this week. I assume that's obviously out for now. And then the Open Championship starts in 10 days. And this is at St. Andrews, the old course, where Rory McIlroy has had a ton of success. Just 5 years ago, the last time it was held there, he shot an opening round 63, which ties the all-time major championship scoring record for a single round. And honestly, it could have been a few shots better. He was so good that day. Came out the next day in some brutal wins and shot an 80. Bounced back to shoot 68, 69 in the final two rounds and finished in a share of third place, even with that 80. Never put a round together in the 70s for the entire week. So it's a course where he's had success. It's a course that I know he was really looking forward to playing. Based on last year, I think we can safely say that he might play his best golf in the second half of the summer also, winning the Open Championship, PGA Championship last year. And, again, I hate to speculate, but if this knocks him out for the remaining few months of the PGA Tour season, then I guess we're not going to see him maybe at the major championships. He's not going to have a chance to defend those two titles from last year.
Yeah, again, this came out of nowhere, right? Just final thought for you, Jason. This when I saw it because you retweeted it, this just came up in the last 15 or 20 minutes, and this was not something anyone knew about prior to that, right?
No, absolutely not. I don't think anybody had any inkling that this was coming down. I just happened to be waking up early. I'm heading back from the Greenbrier Classic and happened to be looking at Twitter at the right time and saw he tweeted that post. And I think a lot of us in the golf world now are first surprised and second trying to scramble around and figure out exactly what this means for Rory McIlroy going forward.
All right. Thank you very much, Jason. As soon as you hear anything else, let us know. Jason Sobel with us on his cell phone on his way to an airport. You just heard him say it. He was just starting his day, and like many others, just saw it on Rory McIlroy's feed. But, Mike, again, I always turn to you as though you're a doctor because you were a football player, so you know injuries. I'm just looking at that. There's no way in the world that guy's going to be playing the British Open in a week and a half.
No, but also remember what you do nowadays is you immobilize things right away. You'll see athletes all the time right after games if they have, even if it's a little minor or less. If it doesn't, when you see that, I think the first thing you think of, oh, those must be a major thing. Sometimes that's not the case. What you do is immobilize it right away, and you start the healing process right away, especially with ice, elevation, ankle. You know, again, as I said, it's supposedly the most common of the ligament injury. So this is completely on what grade of strain, sprain, tear it is.
Does the word total rupture mean anything?
Total rupture is obviously.
He wrote total rupture of left ATFL and associated joint capsule damage in a soccer kickabout with friends on Saturday. Continuing to assess extent of injury and treatment plan day by day. Rehab already started. Working hard to get back as soon as I can.
So he's saying rehab already started. So I don't know if it's not going to involve surgery at all. Obviously, we're right in the beginning of this, so we have to wait more. A lot of times it's immobilization, which is exactly what's going on right now. And these things, to what degree? Everybody knows when you roll your ankle how there's that immediate pain, immediately. But then, after a minute or two, depending if it's not that bad, you can start doing what you were doing again, and then there's really hurting it and total ruptures is what he is saying there. Then it can lead to surgery or longer term type of rehab, and you're talking 6-8 weeks from immobilization to starting the rehab process. And believe me, the rehab process with an ankle is tedious at best of what you have to go through. And if you played anything long enough, or heck, you don't even have to play to have hurt your ankle to understand that the key is and these are professional athletes, so obviously he's going to have the best of care and rehab, and they're going to get that going right away after you immobilize it. You try and keep the swelling down. And again, we don't even know if it needs surgery or not. That certainly would add to it. But as we said, out for the Open could be. And after that, I mean, really, that's what we're concerned about, right? I mean,
sure.
The majors.
It's a week and a half. The British Open is a week and a half away.
I don't think there's any shot on God's green earth that that's going to happen. It's just a matter of how much time is he going to miss. And at that point, you just make sure you're back and ready to go because, remember, you're not just golfing on it. You're walking on it the whole time.
Again, a reminder, because Jason's phone was a little scratchy in case you couldn't make out everything he was saying. He is the defending champion at the 2 remaining majors this year. He won the British last year. He won the PGA Championship last year. He's currently 5-1 to win the Open Championship, which is the best odds in the field. He's been number 1 in the world since late last summer. Obviously, this just adds momentum also to the Jordan Spieth train as he tries to go through and win the Spieth Slam. We'll see if he's able to do it. So, again, just stunning news.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Let's get to the hoops here and the decisions that were made. Obviously, it was a long 3-day weekend, so a lot of things have happened, and I guess the biggest would be the big men, LaMarcus Aldridge and DeAndre Jordan, making their decisions over the weekend. Let's start with Aldridge choosing San Antonio, and you heard in the Open there Brian Windhorst saying that he not only chose the Spurs team, but he chose the Spurs organization. Look, let's face it. One of the many reasons the NBA is in a really good place is because the most important and best players have prioritized winning. And I'm not putting Greg Monroe in this category, but Greg Monroe, who was a player with all the options in the world, and I'm sure this you did talk about with George Sedano on Friday, because this happened Thursday afternoon. When any player in the NBA, with basically the same offers on the table, chooses the city of Milwaukee over the cities of New York or Los Angeles, when LaMarcus Aldridge, the Lakers would have done anything to get him to come there and carry the legacy, to be the next Laker, to take the torch from Kobe and everything else.
Word is they were bummed they couldn't get a third interview.
And he chooses San Antonio. Then it just goes to show you, here's a player who wants to win. And that is an organization that has proved they know what they're doing. They have great players. They have a great coach. They have a great organization top to bottom. So to me, it was the decision I expected him to make. I'm not the least bit surprised. And I think right now, anyone paying attention says your favorites to meet in the final next year are Cleveland and San Antonio.
I would agree with that. I think it would have been a real shock had he gone anywhere else. I know there was talk of Phoenix because they got Tyson Chandler, so he knew he wasn't going to play center there. He said he did not want to play center at all. As it went on an extra couple of days, there were those Portland fans that thought, hey, could we have a shot here? Damian Lillard, trying to get the personal plea to Aldridge to come back to Portland, but I don't think a lot of people felt that was going to happen and that this was inevitable, that he was going to go to San Antonio. Duncan making the non-surprising statement, I think, that he was coming back for his 19th year. So the gang is back for another one, back and better than ever, to use your line. It certainly applies to them without question. Then you hear the thought had always been that Greg Popovich will walk off into the sunset with Tim Duncan. He says he'll honor the rest of his contract, which still has a few more years, obviously, left on it as well. So that team is not only built for right now, but between LaMarcus Aldridge and Kawhi Leonard, I mean, that's a nice duo right there to continue to build around as the older players maybe take their last bow this year, though haven't we heard that line before? We'll see about that, but I'm completely with you. It's amazing all the talk about Golden State and what they've done and maybe where they're going to go and how good they are and the new kind of the NBA and how they fit it and the depth of their team. We have basically just pushed them aside. And here they are again. I'm sure they're all going, here we are, NBA champs, and the chip on our shoulder has now grown even bigger because everybody is pointing towards San Antonio, including us, to say that they would be the favorite coming out of the West.
And that's fine if they want to view it that way. Look, they're the champs. Congratulations to them. Right now, on paper, I would take San Antonio to beat them.
I agree.
But that doesn't mean that it's a lock to do so. A lot of some of the teams, the better teams in the West, have suffered major losses now, including Portland. And people forget Portland was a really good team last year. Before Wes Matthews got hurt, Portland was right there at or near the top of the conference. And if they had brought the gang back together again there, and they do re-sign Damian Lillard.
But they lose Matthews to Dallas. And they
lose Aldridge. So they're done. I mean, forget about Portland. And the Clippers suffer a major, major loss. The Clippers are a team I still can't believe didn't beat Houston. And if they had gotten to Golden State, who knows what would have happened. And now DeAndre Jordan goes to Dallas. And let me ask you a question. Did you read the stories about Chris Paul and everything over the weekend, about him freezing him out and not dapping up after a play, all the rest of that?
Yeah.
How bad does Chris Paul come out of this thing looking? Because it certainly sounds like, and look, he'll never say it, I wouldn't imagine, and you'll never know. It certainly sounds like a big part of the reason that DeAndre Jordan left the Clippers was because he did not like playing with Chris Paul. He wants to be more of an option offensively and all the rest of that. And Mark Cuban has talked about him being the next Shaq, and let's slow down just a touch on that.
Yeah.
I think 80% of his baskets were dunks. But is this a bad look for Chris Paul? I thought those stories looked bad.
I think the two things fed on one another. That maybe there was a relationship issue, and DeAndre Jordan felt he could be higher than the third banana on a team. Right? Because that's what he was with the Clippers, and that wasn't changing. You know, he was the guy, 534 attempts, 520 from 5 feet and in. And as Greeny said, probably 80% of those from 0 feet, dunking the ball. So he wasn't going to get higher than that. His offensive game wasn't going to change much. And I don't blame him for thinking I can go be a bigger piece of the puzzle on another team because I feel I can develop my offensive skills. A lot of people weren't sure if that was going to happen. We had Bruce Bowen in. He does. Bruce Bowen is a big fan of DeAndre Jordan and does think that he can elevate his offensive game. And he'll get the chance to do that now. So that's what it comes down to. If he can, we know what a rim protector he is and a defensive player he is and a rebounder that he is and what he did when Blake Griffin wasn't on the court when he was injured. He was just a monster in there. But that's the question on him. Okay, can you go be, the first, or that was one of our questions, can he be the first or second, last week, can he be the first or second best player on a championship team? I didn't think so. Bruce Bowen said absolutely yes. He absolutely thinks he can. He can do that. So that's what we have to wait and see. It's one of those, can he not add more to his offensive game, or hasn't he done it just because he hasn't been asked to do it? And certainly I don't blame his confidence level saying that's what I want to go do so I can stay here, be the third guy, not really get along with the top guy, and make my money, but I'm still going to make some darn good money out here because all these guys that's on that 4-year deal, they got the player option after 3, the big money that's going to be out there, they can all hit it again. So I get it from his thought process when you're at that level or think you should be at a higher level. Sometimes you overthink yourself or think more of yourself than you really are, but he is now going to get a chance to see what he can do offensively.
Yeah, and that's all well and good. And look, Dallas is a dangerous team. The West is loaded from top to bottom, and maybe there's a little bit of a shifting in power one way or the other. Some of the other moves that have been made / will be made, LeBron James is sitting on the side and just watching / making the Cavaliers continue to remake their roster. And they may be on the verge of a significant upgrade in another spot, which is to say if they add Joe Johnson, they've got this tradable commodity in Brendan Haywood's expiring contract. And if they trade him for Joe Johnson, I see I've got sound on this here. Here's Brian Windhorst on what the addition of Joe Johnson would mean if the Cavaliers get him. I mean, the Cavaliers look like they're going to be unbelievable.
LeBron would love a move like this. The idea that they could upgrade their wing. Now you could do something like bring Iman Shumpert off the bench, have a bona fide scorer. That was one of the things that affected the Cavs last year. They didn't always have a lot of scoring, especially we saw in the finals.
Yeah.
So the idea of getting more depth, getting more scoring, getting more shooting, which is something that always LeBron wants. Joe Johnson is a terrific clutch shooter in his career.
Yeah, let's say that a different way. In the finals, they had no scoring besides LeBron James. Obviously, if Kyrie Irving comes back healthy, that solves that problem, addresses that problem immediately. Kevin Love addresses that problem immediately. And Joe Johnson, if you've got Joe Johnson as, at best, the 4th best player on your team, and maybe not even that, depending on how you slice up some of the rest of it, I mean, they're just going to run away and hide.
They're loaded. I mean, who's challenging right now? We talked about Miami if they got the group back together. So they're still going to be a formidable team depending on injuries, but that's true everywhere. And then Chicago. Those are the two teams you look to. I don't know if people are still looking to Washington and Atlanta had the year that they had and then the way they went out of the playoffs. I don't know if anybody's thinking, oh, yeah, it's going to happen for them again, especially where Cleveland is right now. I'm with you. I think they have basically right now it's horrible to say, certainly as a former athlete as well, because there are other teams out there currently trying to do it. But I think they have a walk through the East at this point.
I would agree completely. I do think Miami is one of the few teams that you look at as a possible competitor. Chicago, Atlanta, whatever it is you want to put in there. But most of the other good teams in the Eastern Conference are losing players, and the Cavaliers are just are hoarding them. They're
really
like stockpiling players.
It won't be a 7-man rotation next year with all the people they have.
Well, they could bring 7 guys off their bench. That's a really good situation they've put together there, and good for them. And then, of course, people continue to focus on the 2 teams on the respective coasts, filling out their rosters with the other players.
Yeah,
I mean, the Knicks have put together a couple of other players who were good. The Lakers go out and get Roy Hibbert as their big man. They wanted a lot of other people, and they bring in Hibbert, who seems to be the antithesis of the game of basketball the way it's being currently played. It's interesting because 3 years ago, we were talking about Hibbert, who practically picked up Tyson Chandler and slam dunked him in a series against the Knicks, and was, when he was not in foul trouble, extraordinarily valuable against Miami. We were saying, is Hibbert coming into his own as a star?
And he wasn't.
And then it all just went completely the other way.
I mean, because again, if he was a dominant center, that could obviously it can still work. We keep saying in this new NBA, but if you have a dominant center, that you can still force the issue. But he's proven he's not a dominant center.
He's a rim protector, but he can't move his feet in space. He's obviously big and a little bit clunky. Doesn't have a very refined offensive game. He's exactly not the center that everyone is talking about being what you want in the current NBA. Let's see what the Lakers plan to do with him and around him. It's been a disaster. I mean, to me, it's been a disaster for the Lakers.
Oh, without question, to the point we talked Friday about, Jim Buss and how long. And last year, he said himself, if it wasn't done in 3 to 4 years, that he would step down. We wondered if Jeannie. We brought into that aspect.
Mike, I had this conversation with you. This is another one that you and I had together. Yes. How long do you think I was gone? I took off the holiday.
We did all this. Well, one day was a huge day in free agency last week.
I spoke to you about this on Thursday.
Really?
We talked about, we found Jim Buss's quotes. No, we talked about it.
Wow.
We talked about this. This is just sad.
You know what it is? It's disheartening.
Yeah. You enjoyed the conversation, by the way. It was
I did?
Yes. It was a good discussion. You liked it.
When it was done,
you said to me afterwards, that was pretty good. You had an egg white omelet with turkey and mushrooms.
Guys, at Sport Clips Haircuts, we appreciate everything you do. So this month, we're giving you double the Sport Clips MVP experience for the price of a single. It's the Sport Clips Instant Replay. After your haircut, go into overtime on our legendary hot towel treatment. Enjoy a double header of our massaging shampoo and soothing scalp treatment. And beat the heat with our new MVP on ice. Our legendary hot towel becomes the refreshing chilled towel at no extra charge. Sport Clips, it's good to be a guy.
Rory McIlroy, the #1 golfer in the world, posted a picture of himself on Instagram with a message that says he suffered a ruptured ligament of his left ankle, says he's assessing his treatment plan and his day-to-day. We're going to bring in our Stephania Bell, our injury analyst, in a second, and try and figure out exactly what this means. Congratulations again to the U.S. women's national team, a 5-2 win over Japan in the final yesterday, the 3rd Women's World Cup title all time and the first in 16 years for the U.S. And Major League Baseball's All-Star Game starters were announced yesterday. We did not get the Royal Flush. We did get 4 of a kind.
Yes, we did.
4 Royals named to the team. The Blue Jays' Josh Donaldson, however, was the leading vote getter, setting a record with over 14 million votes. And SportsCenter with Mike and Mike is brought to you by LifeLock. Do you bank online, pay at the pump, use public Wi-Fi? If so, your identity could be at risk, so help protect it with the best, LifeLock. Enroll in minutes, and your protection starts immediately. Go to LifeLock.com now. Use our name, Mike, as the promotional code. You will save 10%. LifeLock.com. Before we bring in Stephania, an interesting note someone sent in here talking about how the people of San Diego, and it's a limited sample.
Right.
Only 3,000 and something people voted in a San Diego Union Tribune poll, said that it was more important to the city to have Comic-Con there than the Chargers. This is a pretty good note from Jared in Indiana, who writes, as a resident of Indiana, I think I can offer a perspective on this. In Indianapolis, the Colts matter more in daily life than the Indianapolis 500. Even in the off-season, they're in the newspaper and the news daily. You can constantly see blue and white jerseys, hats, and shirts. Open-wheel racing, on the other hand, matters in May and is secondary the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. But if somehow both were thinking of leaving, most Hoosiers would say the city can't lose the 500.
The money they bring in, right?
Well, not only that, but it's one of the things that makes the city unique. people love the Colts and would hate to see them go, but they are one of 32 NFL teams. The 500, on the other hand, is the biggest event of its kind in the world. No one else can claim it. I would imagine in San Diego they feel the same way about Comic-Con.
That's a great point. I think add into the fact that people that come in from out of town to fill up hotels and restaurants and the influx of money into the city as opposed to the fans that live right there going to the football games. I think that would have to be part of it as well. But that's a very good point.
Also bear in mind that there was a time when they would have Super Bowls in San Diego.
Right.
We've been to one, but now
Yes.
based upon the condition of the stadium and everything else, and that's one of the reasons there's this fight and one of the reasons they are overwhelmingly likely to leave, you're not going to have that there. So just how much business is 8 home games a year bringing into San Diego?
Right, as opposed to what Comic-Con brings in, the 130-plus thousand, and how many of those are from outside of San Diego that are bringing money into their city.
Okay, we're Mike and Mike. Let's bring Stephania Bell, ESPN injury analyst, in on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Stephania, good morning. And we want trying to get to the bottom of this as best we can. And first and foremost, it's always dangerous just to take an athlete and have him put up on Instagram, this is what happened to me, right, and assume that these are all the details that there are. But for the moment, that's all we know is what Roy McIlroy himself put on Instagram, that he had suffered a total rupture of a ligament in his left ankle, along with the requisite joint damage. So, Stephania, assuming that what he's tweeting is accurate, what can you tell us?
Good morning, guys. Actually, I was impressed with how specific he was. He said an ATFL ligament. So just to explain to folks who might be wondering, that stands for anterior, meaning it's on the front, talofibular, because it's a ligament that connects the talus, or the ankle bone, to the fibula, which is the outer lower leg bone. But to put it in simple English, it's the most common ligament you can sprain in your ankle. This is your garden variety basketball sprain. This is where it happens. He did say total rupture, meaning in grade 3, that would indicate the ligament's completely torn. And he's going to have some challenges with pain, swelling, not only being able to golf, but being able to walk the course.
So let's go through that, and based on what he said, let's take it to grade 3. And now grade 3 for his sport, because you talk about the injuries related to the sport that they're in, let's look at grade 3 and start to look at between rehab and time possibly he would miss golfing because of this.
It's really hard to say because you never want to count an athlete out. We know that the British is so close. And it's not going to heal in that period of time. You're talking about weeks for ligament to scar and become stable again. The question is, can he be functional, and can he be functional enough to perform at a high level? And that's highly dependent on the athlete. You saw him in the picture on crutches in a boot. That's to minimize any motion, to allow it to scar down to the extent possible. But after you have an injury like that, it's not just the healing of the ligament, it's trying to restore mobility of the ankle. And as long as you have swelling, that's going to be tough to do. And it's also trying to restore your balance, which is so critical in golf. You think about when he drives the ball, you transfer all that weight towards the outer left side. If you're unstable there, and if it's painful when you hit it, that's going to be a problem. And again, walking the course just uphill and down dale and all the unevenness in it, that's where you're most likely to actually feel this, not only in terms of discomfort, but to potentially roll it again.
So along with this and rehabbing this, the one thing I know in sports injuries is they want to get the body part moving as quickly as they can again, but there has to be enough time of immobilization to let it start healing. So in a situation like this, before he gets, doing the alphabet with his foot, which, we've all been through that one, is how long do you think in a situation like this you're going to be immobilizing that thing to let it heal up before you start the rehab?
It's interesting. You actually can start moving it pretty quickly because you want to restore normal joint mechanics to the degree that you can. And you want to stimulate blood flow to the area and all of those things. So the immobilization will be obviously when he's up and walking around. He'll be in that boot. He'll be on the crutches, not putting weight on it. But he'll start things in rehab, I would think, almost immediately. He sounded in his Instagram, if we can extrapolate from that, like he was getting more evaluation done. So there may be a little bit more to determine exactly what else is going on or if the picture's any more complicated. But I would think he would start to do things in rehab to get the ankle moving very soon, within days.
Mike and Mike, Stephania Bell with us again. I'm going to read you this is exactly what he put on Instagram. Total rupture of left ATFL and associated joint capsule damage in a soccer kickabout with friends on Saturday. Continuing to assess extent of injury and treatment plan day by day. Rehab already started, working hard to get back as soon as I can. Quickly, Stephania, what is associated joint capsule damage?
So the capsule is the fibrous tissue that basically encapsulates a joint, and the ligament lays flat against it. So when you tear the ligament, you have potential to tear the capsule underneath. And really what that translates to is potentially more instability, more swelling, more pain, just a tougher injury to come back from.
And just a finishing thought, because when I hear the word total rupture, you start thinking about the possibility of requiring surgery. You never use that word at all in this discussion, and he's talked about already beginning rehab. So it certainly doesn't sound like that's on the table.
Not from the information that we have so far. Again, we're working with limited info, and there might be something else that would suggest it, but most of these injuries are rehab-oriented. I will tell you, if he was playing a sport like basketball or soccer or something like that where he had to explode and change direction, we'd be talking potentially months for him to come back. Golf, it's a little more open, but I still think it impacts his game, even if he can manage to be out there.
All right, Stephania, thank you very much for the insight. We appreciate it. Stephania Bell, our injury analyst.
The best of Mike and Mike.
I, as I mentioned earlier, was traveling over this holiday weekend, and so I was on a very long flight yesterday with Wi-Fi. And it was late in my flight that these stories, a couple of stories started to emerge about Jason Pierre-Paul, JPP of the New York Giants. And I'm sure anyone who was even remotely plugged in on social media yesterday saw this. That started out with some reports that he had to be taken to the hospital Saturday night during fireworks because of an incident involving a fireworks accident and his hands. And the next thing you know, as I'm following this on Twitter, the stories are he blew off multiple fingers, he blew off his thumb, and all of this. Oh, my goodness, this is career-threatening. This is incredible. The jokes are going around, the photos. Yeah. It's all well, none of it is well and good. No. And as it turns out, it probably all was not even remotely true. And it's a great reminder of how, as fabulous as social media is, we always talk about the downside of social media being the meanness. Yeah. There's also the absolute lack of accuracy. No one is checking on this stuff. And one person puts something out there, it's like the ultimate game of telephone. Where you whisper something and by the time you get to the end of the line, something else entirely comes out. So, to the best of our knowledge now, and I'm going to read you the latest reporting that we have, he didn't blow his thumb off. He didn't blow off his fingers or anything like that. Here's what we know. Jason Pierre-Paul injured his hands in a fireworks accident in South Florida. One source tells ESPN he has bad burns on his palm and tips of 3 fingers. One finger is being checked for nerve damage, but the source said it is believed Pierre-Paul will be fine. Now, the injuries could affect his future with the Giants. After he had a very good year last year, the Giants used the franchise tag on him. He's yet to sign the tender, which is $14.8 million. So as of this moment, he is not under contract. Because he has not yet signed it, the Giants do have the right to withdraw that tag. They can pull it if they want to. If they do, he becomes a free agent. Right. So it'll be interesting to see how the Giants choose to handle this, and clearly we'll wait and see what the medical reports are coming out of this. But from everything we know as of this moment, again, I just read you the reports, we're talking about bad burns on his palm and tips of 3 fingers with one finger being checked for nerve damage. The sources believe that he will be fine, which is certainly not great, but it's a far way away from having your fingers blown off, your thumb blown off, and a lot of the other stuff that you would have thought had happened if you were just reading Twitter yesterday.
That was the worst thing I heard of all the different tweets and different variations of stories was that he had 3 fingers blown off, including his thumb, which, if true, his career was over. There was no doubt about that. But then you read more. You started reading tweets of what it seemed that people were there, that, yes, he was in the hospital, but it was more just the flesh on the hand and some fingers, that no fingers were missing. Now we're waiting to hear exactly what's going on. And I'm sure our guys will get that until we get a real report on just how bad the injury is. And listen, we've heard horrific stories of firework injuries, and I talked about shooting off fireworks on the show on Friday and such, but You know, the one thing you always want to be careful. Obviously, everybody wants to be careful. Nobody's trying to get hurt, but unfortunately, every year bad accidents do happen, and you hear of horrific results from it. And this one, that's what we started to hear, were certainly for his profession, would have been horrific results for him being done playing. But we'll wait and see. Is it burns? Is it just fingertips? Does he lose some nerve damage in one of the fingertips? Is his career still intact? If so, I don't imagine there will be any issues with the Giants. I wouldn't think so if he can play. That he would end, playing off that deal, a one-year deal for $14.8, and go from there. But you're right. The way it started going around, forgetting all the what people do on Twitter and having what they perceive as their fun, but some pretty bad tweets going on about that. I'm sure we'll find out a lot more today about what's going on. I'm sure he's in contact with the Giants. I'm sure the Giants people will be involved, in looking at it and making their determination of just how bad it is. And you just hope that it was just, a bad accident, not a horrific one as far as his career is concerned, that it was a bad accident and that he's able to heal up from it and continue his career.
Well, it's one of those where if he was under contract, the team, and he were to injure himself in such a manner that it would destroy his career or disrupt his career, the team would have all sorts of financial ability to get out of the deal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With this one, it's a little different because, again, he hasn't signed the tender. They can pull it. But if they do, he becomes a free agent.
He can sign with anybody at any time for anything.
So that's an interesting little scenario. He had a very good second half of the season last year.
12.5 sacks on the year last year. Did have an excellent season, enough where they tagged him and they knew they were going to have to pay him at least the $14.8 for this year if it just played off that one offer and didn't do a long-term deal. So this is all going to be based on just how bad the injury is. I mean, that's the. If it truly was something that was just horrific and his career was over, I mean, that pretty much would tell the story. That there would be really nothing more to say. But here we have to see how bad it is, what the recovery time is, and what he can do off of that, which I'm sure the Giants are involved with everything.
So it's a day of a lot of injury news on social media between all the erroneous stuff going on around JPP yesterday, and then, again, Rory McIlroy this morning on Instagram announcing his own injury. And, by the way, as a result of that injury, Jordan Spieth's odds to win the Open Championship, the British Open, improved from 6-1 to 9-2. So you're looking at Spieth, who is trying to accomplish the Spieth Slam.
Right.
And if you're looking at the odds, by the way, Spieth is 9-2, McIlroy's 8-1, Dustin Johnson's 12-1, Justin Rose 15-1, Tiger Woods 25-1.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt, frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the quartage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
So a sensational win, and 16 years later, the women of the U.S. are champions of the world again. 16 years ago, one of the stars of that team was our own Julie Foudy, who joins us live now this morning from Vancouver on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Julie, thanks a million. And let's start with that. You have a connection to this, obviously, that so few others do, and at the risk of making you feel old, I'm sure a lot of the girls on this team, when they were girls, grew up watching you and idolizing you. So what was it like? Just give us a sense, forgetting everything else, of the vibe there in the stadium, on the field afterwards, the celebration. Just give us a sense of what it was like to be there.
Yeah, it was amazing, Mike. To be in the stadium and hear the roar, and especially those first 16 minutes, as you guys were just walking through the game. I mean, those first 16 minutes were just absolute nuts. We actually had an email chain going of our 99ers, of the whole team, plus Coach DeChico, and it was like tears, emotion, pride. I mean, all these wonderful adjectives flying across of how proud they were. So it was just so neat to see it, and especially given how much this team had struggled early on in the tournament, for them to have this explosion like this and say, okay, this is the United States you knew was in there this whole tournament. And so it's not just that they won, of course, but the way they won, and Carly Lloyd just having a beast of a game.
So as we look at the 99 win, and by the way, that 99 is a show which you hosted was fantastic. We'll get to that in a minute. I just loved every minute of that. So you guys win, they win. So first, let's start with the positive. What's the biggest similarity between the 99 team and the 15 team?
Biggest similarity, I think, is there's this joy to playing, you know, and one of the things that you probably noticed, Golic, with the 99ers is there was a lot of laughter everywhere we went. And I see that with these guys, you know, when you're at training, when you're hanging out with them, they're having fun, you know, and especially in the latter part of this tournament when they're at training, it's silliness and it's goofiness and it's all the right things. There's a looseness and a joy to what you're doing. And I think as in with anything in life, if you can bring that in, you're going to be successful, especially as the stakes get higher and the pressure is higher. And even though there was so much criticism early on, you know, the other similarity I saw is that they just didn't care. It was like, look, this is our family. We're going to get it done. And nothing on the outside can distract us from that goal.
So then what's the biggest difference of the two teams?
Gosh, that's a great question. I haven't even thought of that. Biggest difference probably is the depth. They just had so much depth, you know, and to take nothing away from 99, but you're living in a world right now where there's better teams, there's better training, more access to training. And with this group, you know, that is what really won it for them is look at all the players that contributed for them early on in the stage, in the game, in the World Cup. It was Megan Rapinoe who was the one who they had to lean on when everyone else was struggling. And then Carly Lloyd comes through in the second phase, but then you have the whole back line and you have Hope Solo contributing and you have Christian Press who gets the goal, Kelly O'Hara who comes in at right midfield in her first, you know, minutes of the entire World Cup, so, and gets a goal. So I would think that it's the depth of this group is different than before.
Mike and Julie Foudy, you mentioned how everything went nuts and went right for the Americans last night. In the first 20 minutes, we talked about it. They had only scored one goal in the first 20 minutes of their previous 6 games combined. They scored 4 goals last night. Why? What went right? What specifically happened that caused the beginning of that game to go just as ridiculously well as it did?
Well, one, Japan came out, I thought, really slow, and then the U.S. just pounced on them and with set pieces. I mean, that was the one thing you knew about Japan is they're not good on set pieces. Those first 2 Carly Lloyd goals are great goals off of set pieces, but also Japan was just caught sleeping. And I think the U.S. took a page from watching the England-Japan semifinal where Japan looked like a totally different team in that semifinal than the rest of the tournament. They struggled because they were put under pressure. And so everything you heard from the U.S. was, we're going to be the ones on the attack. We're going to go after them. And they did that. I remember in the second minute thinking, oh, my gosh, what a great first 2 minutes, not even knowing what the next 14 would entail, which would be 4 goals, which is just absolutely crazy. So, I mean, and then just to have Carly Lloyd in a place where she's so confident with a swagger and a look in her eyes. I mean, you could just see it in her eyes. She was going to win this World Cup. It didn't matter. Get out of my way is basically how her body language was as well, which the team just feeds off of.
So that third goal she had, the 56-yarder where she took a peek at the goalie who was up a little bit and dropped it over the top. You have certainly played and seen way more soccer than we have. How rare and incredible was that goal?
How ridiculous. It was crazy. It's rare. I mean, you see it occasionally, but not for your hat trick in 15 minutes in a World Cup final. And she actually said last night, she said, I had never tried that in a game. I had tried that in practice once and made it, so I thought, why not? But to have the presence of mind to look up and see, you know, that Kaihori, the Japanese keeper, was off the line too far, look up and strike that and make it. It was phenomenal. I mean, that was a game I've never seen a player have. And to have it in a World Cup final like that in 15-minute stretch was something just remarkable to witness live.
I'm curious, just to a follow-up to that. She said, as you just mentioned, she's tried it in practice but not a game. Does she try that in the game if they're not up 3-0?
Yeah, I think she does. I mean, I think that's the beauty of Carly Lloyd is she's willing to take risks. She's going to try. I mean, I really think, too, that's the success this team had was when they figured that out, that midfield combo early on. She was playing a much deeper role in this tournament. And then finally, and it's funny because it only happened when Lauren Holiday gets that double yellow that knocks her out of the World Cup. Knocks her out of one game. She has to be suspended for one game. And so they switched things around, and that's when it started to click because Carly Lloyd was released higher. So when she gets in that higher attacking central midfield position, there's just a confidence to her that's totally different from what we saw in the beginning of the tournament.
Julie Foudy is with us from Vancouver on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline. Cool down at Subway with the new Fuse half and half fresh brewed iced tea Subway Eat Fresh. How about the role of Abby Wambach on this team? We've talked about that a lot this morning. Her willingness to take the back seat, if you will, to not be the star of the team when, and I would love your perspective on this as well, she may be the greatest American soccer player that we've ever produced, and yet sort of her willingness to step back. We've made comparisons to Tim Duncan and his willingness at this late stage of his career to take that role with the San Antonio Spurs. How did you see her role in all of this and the significance of that for this team?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it, Mike. I mean, I've always loved and respected her as the greatest player on this planet and the greatest goal scorer on this planet, but I have never admired her more than this, watching her over the last 2-3 weeks, because here you are in a situation as the captain where you come in thinking you're going to get a lot of minutes, right? And she knows that maybe, hey, I might not start every game, but you're thinking you're going to be a real part of it on the field, and then her role has changed, and they were having more success with her off the field. So for her to then, every time you'd come post game to her with sound, she would say, and it was genuine, you know, she believed it. She would be so excited. Last night she's like, I was so excited for Carly Lloyd when she scored, and then Heath getting that goal and Holiday getting that goal after the midfield had gotten so much criticism early on. To see them get that in that moment, and the positivity that came out of her, that was real. I mean, the players take their cues, as you guys know, from that. And she could have easily, even if she'd done it in a subtle way and been quieter or reserved a little bit. I mean, Abby is a larger-than-life personality. So she's dropping F-bombs in the huddle at halftime when she's not even in the game, you know, getting them fired up. But to me, that, you know, I talked to her yesterday, and I said, that was the thing that really sealed it for me, was you and your leadership in this, because it could have gone a very different way for the United States team, and I don't think they would have won the World Cup if they didn't have her as the great leader she was this tournament. You can't say enough about that.
If you play sports long enough, you're on both sides of a game like this at some point in your career. So from that side of it for Japan, at what point in watching that game did you see, for lack of a better term, maybe the light go out of their eyes when they kind of knew it was over?
Well, when they got to 4-2, as I was hearing you guys talk about before I came on, when they got to 4-2, I think they felt like they had some life. And that's the thing that the U.S. knew, and the benefit of the pain of 4 years from 4 years ago. I mean, the U.S. knew, like, look, we were up before. Let's not go through this again, even though it was only a 1-goal margin before. But let's not go through this whole drill again. And Japan, I mean, that's the thing about Japan, is they're just always going to come back and keep fighting and fighting, and you love that about that country and this team. But when Heath gets that fifth goal, and it's 5-2 now, I mean, on a defense that had gone almost 40 minutes without letting in a goal before Japan got its first one, I think they knew this is going to be a tall task here. I'm not sure we're going to do it, but still, I mean, so much respect for that team and what they've done and how they've changed this program and turned it around over the last 5-10 years.
And we always talk about going forward. We know players that won't be on this team, including Abby. Carly Lloyd, it will be 36 when the next World Cup rolls around. Mm-hmm. So is there enough young talent on this team to continue? And everybody, you know, the first thing you do when you win a championship is say, can they win it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing that sets the U.S. apart in women's soccer, and which is why we make the argument we should be winning this every single World Cup, we have 2 million girls playing in this country compared to the rest of the world. If you combine all the players in the rest of the world, I don't think they match what we have. Best funding, more resources, best infrastructure, greatest grassroots structure. So we have all the things that countries are clamoring for around the world for their women's programs. So you look at, just on this roster, Julie Johnston, what a huge tournament she has. 6-7 months ago, she wasn't even on the World Cup roster, and she comes in. Morgan Bryan, the youngest player on this roster at 22, she comes in, you could argue, was the key to changing the way the U.S. played in the midfield. Megan Klingenberg, the outside back to save the header off the line to save the game against Germany. So there's and again, that depth of that team, there's a lot, and there's so many coming through the under 20. So I think the U.S. is, and rightfully so, should be good for a very long time.
Well, we all know that Klingenberg and Bryan owe everything to Jeff Van Gundy.
Yes.
They're the ones who are living at Jeff Van Gundy's house. All right, Foudy.
Right. That's a great story.
Yeah, it is.
All right, let's to wrap it up with this. Let's get what really is obviously the most important business on the table here. If your team from '99 played this team right now,
yep.
I mean, at your best versus their best, who wins?
You know what? You'd need paramedics on the sidelines for that one, Greenie. I don't like to even do the comparison because it's two different squads, and everyone wants us to say, who's better? What would you take? Who would you take? And I'll tell you, I'm not alone when I say I speak for a lot of the 99ers. And when I say we're just so happy that they finally get to enjoy the spotlight in this, and that, to take nothing away from what we did in '99, but we so badly wanted this narrative to change. 16 years is too long in between World Cups for the United States, and so we've badly been wanting that third star, and especially for you're watching this next generation of players. My kids had Rapinoe and Wambach jerseys on in the stadium yesterday, and to see them inspired by them and what they're going to do to change the game here in this country is just wonderful to see.
What a politically correct answer.
Come on.
Instead of saying that you'd shut them out. Come on. Just say it.
That's it.
Julie, thanks a million. Your passion for this was evident throughout. I really enjoyed following you on Twitter through all this. I know you think in a private moment you guys would beat them 3-0, but that's a whole other discussion for another time. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie. Appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
It's Julie Foudy. She wants no part of that.
This has been the Best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNradio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The Best of Mike and Mike.